In this video, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of how to use your DJ equipment. In this video, I'm going to be using the Pioneer DDJ-FLX4. However, with that being said, a lot of the DJ controllers have the same functions and dials. So even if you don't have a Pioneer DDJ-FLX4, a lot of the explanations of these functions can still transfer across to other DJ controllers, as they all pretty much have the same buttons and dials to DJ with anyway. I'm going to try and cover all the different functions on the DJ controller as best I can in this video, but some functions might need a little bit more detail in other videos. But it should be enough for you to get started and get familiar with your DJ controller and know what each function does. So with that being said, let's dive into it. Alright, so first off, we're going to start nice and easy with the play and pause button. And it does exactly that. It plays the track and it pauses the track. It doesn't really do much else. Now, the other button just above it, called the cue button, is a little more interesting and has a few more functions. So firstly, when a track is playing and you press the cue button, it will take the track back to its cue point and stop the track from playing. So it's kind of like a stop button. So the track now is playing. When I press the cue button, it will stop the track and take the track back to the cue point. Now the cue point is generally on the first beat, so you can see this as it taking it back to the start of the track, unless you move the cue point, which I'm going to show you how to do in a moment. Now whilst the track is paused and at the cue point, if you hold down the cue button, it will play the track for as long as you hold it down for. So right now I'm going to press the cue button, hold it down, it's going to play the track, and as soon as I release the cue button, it stops the track and takes it back to the cue point. Now let's say I press play on the track, and then I've paused the track just here. Whilst the track is paused and not at the cue point, and then you press Q, it's going to reset the cue point to this position. So now when I press Q, watch the yellow triangle here, which is the cue point, move to here in the middle where the playhead is. Now you can see I've moved the cue point. So if I press play again, and then press Q, it's going to stop the track and take it back to the cue point. So now it's not back at the start of the track, it's at a different point. And this is one question that I've been asked in the past by my students, is how do you get around this? They often say that they press play, pause the track and go, oh, I want to go back to the start, then press the Q and it ends up resetting the cue point. And then they try and press play and Q and they go back to this point and not sure how to solve the problem. So to solve this, all you really need to do is get the track back to the start of the track however you want to. So for me, I'm just going to drag it across, take it back to that first beat and then press the Q button just here whilst the track is paused and it'll reset that cue point. So what you really need to do is just get into the habit of pressing Q whilst the track is playing if you want to go back to the start of the track, like this. So if you want to go back to the start, press Q. But if you do accidentally press pause, so let's say the track is playing, and I press pause, but I want to go back to the start of the track, you just have to quickly press play and then Q, and it'll take you back to the start. So it comes with a bit of practice, but that's basically how you navigate the Q button. One more quick point on the Q point before I move on is one thing you might see DJs doing on social media and in videos is tapping that Q button before they press play. All they're basically doing there is sampling that first beat of the track and hearing it in their headphones and trying to time it with the other track that's currently playing. This is just to get the timing right when pressing play. So let's say we've got another track on the left hand side and this one is playing to the audience. What you'll see DJs do is just tapping that Q button in time with the other track's beat until they're ready to press play. So it's just a little habit, it's not necessary, you don't need to do that, but I'm just explaining what you might see other DJs doing because you might be a little confused. So now let's take a look at the jog wheel. So that's these two big discs in the middle of the decks. If you touch the top of the jog wheel and start moving it, it's going to act like a vinyl would. So you can spin the track forward and spin the track backwards. This is in play or pause. So if I press play, I can still grab the top of the deck and spin it forwards and backwards. Once I release, it'll start playing again. Then let's hit that Q button to get back to the start. So you can use this to find different parts of the track and be a little bit more accurate. So let's say we want to put the Q button on the fourth beat. We can just move it forward, get to that fourth beat, press Q, and same to go back. It can also be used to beat juggle your tracks in. So we can grab that first beat and beat juggle your track in. Do the wicka wicka sound that everybody wants to grab your decks and do when you're DJing. And you can also do some spin backs as well, where you spin the track back just before you do a mix. And it can sound pretty cool. But apart from that, it doesn't have many other uses. Now, the sides of the jog wheel act a little bit differently. You've got these little notches at the side and you can push it forwards and backwards. And it responds differently than the top of the jog wheel. So what the sides of the jog wheel does is it nudges the track faster and slower slightly as you're nudging it. And then it goes back to its original speed. So from here, if I press play and I nudge it forward, it's going to temporarily speed that track up and then go back to its normal speed after I've done nudging it. So if I can go this way and slow it down. So anti-clockwise slows the track down slightly and clockwise slows the track up slightly. Now you might not be able to tell that much there whilst it's by itself, but if I grab another track up and then I try and time these two tracks together, the sides of the jog wheels are used to help beat match your tracks together. And this is basically where you just get the kick drums and the beats in time with each other, so they sound good to the audience when mixing. So I'm just going to use the end of this track here. So I'm going to press play and I'll deliberately do them out of time, and I'm going to use the jog wheel on the sides just to nudge them back in, and you'll hear them go back together and also see them on the waveform match together as well. So let's press that cue button like the DJs do. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear this slightly out there. So I'm going to nudge them further out. So I'm going to push it forwards. And you can hear that's quite bad. That's called double beating. That's what you don't want as a DJ. So I'm going to slow it down. Just nudge it slower. And now we have two tracks that are beat matched. It's as easy as that. So the sides of the jog wheel are used to slightly speed up and slightly slow down your tracks so you can beat match your tracks together. Now let's take a look at the tempo fader. The tempo fader basically just speeds the track up and slows it down overall. Whereas the sides of the jog wheel do it temporarily, so once you stop nudging it, it goes back to its original speed. The tempo fader would change the overall BPM of the track. And you'll see that in this circle here. So now it's at 130 beats per minute, and this is at its original speed. So when it's at 0%, and at 0 on the tempo fader, that's its original speed. We can speed the track up and slow the track down. Now you also have a thing called a tempo range, and this is just how far you can stretch the track with the tempo fader. So at the minute in the middle here, it's at +6. So that's the smallest range we can have. If I click this button here, it can go to +10, +16, or wide, which goes really, really wide. So I'm just going to take it to +6, and I'm going to put it all the way to the top. From here now, you can see it goes to 137 beats per minute, and that's the fastest it can go at this tempo range. But now if I change it to +10, I can go even faster, and +16, I can go even faster. But this makes the tempo fader a lot more sensitive. But it gives you a wider range to be able to mix different tracks at different BPMs. Now another thing to consider when using the tempo fader is this button here that says MT. This stands for master tempo, and basically this just stops your tracks from getting squeakier when you start moving the tempo fader. So let's have a listen to this track here and have a listen to the vocals. Then if I move the tempo fader up, the beats will go faster, but the track won't go squeakier and change key. It keeps the track in the same key. So now I'm going to do the same thing again, but with master tempo off. So have a listen. So you can hear the difference there. Master tempo on. Sounds more natural. Master tempo off. Master tempo on. Both times the track was at the same speed at 150 beats per minute, which is a bit too fast, but you can hear the difference there. Basically for me, I always have master tempo turned on no matter what I'm doing. It's very rare I'll find an incident where I don't need to have MT turned on. So basically, I just keep that on blue, which is activated all the time. Now what you mainly use the tempo fader for is also in your beat matching. So let's say we've got another track on the left hand side, and we can see this track at original speed, so when it's at 0 is at 126 beats per minute. The track on the right is at 130 beats per minute. So if I press play on both these tracks at the same time, the beats will start moving further away from each other because they're not at the same speed. So have a listen to this. So just a quick example here, we're on Ask No More in the middle of the track, and let's get back to the start. As we now know, press play and then cue. And then we go back to the start. So let's have a listen. You can hear the beats going further and further out there, and it doesn't sound great. So what we can do here with the tempo fader is just match the BPM. So if you have a look on the track on the left, 126, let's move that faster until it gets to 130. So this is where I was saying about the tempo range. The higher the range, the more sensitive this gets. Now you don't have to have it exactly if you know how to beat match. Getting it there or thereabouts, like 129.99 will work. So now if I press play on both tracks at the same time, they should stay in time with each other, especially if I use the jog wheel to nudge the tracks back in. So they're pretty much in there. There we go. And now they should stay in all the time and the beats will not go out of time. So that's basically what the tempo fader is for and how you use it. Now let's take a look at the performance pads. Now the performance pads can have multiple different uses, especially depending on the different DJ controller that you have. But they'll generally have similar things on there like hot cues, loops, beat jump and sampler, and also some pad effects. Now the first one and the main one that the performance pads normally have is hot cues. That's normally the first one on most DJ controllers. Basically what hot cues are is that you can set points in a track that you can jump to just by pressing a button. So you can see on this track here I have quite a few hot cues set up and quite a few different ones as well, which we won't go into right now why they're set up with different colours. But let's say we want to go to hot cue C just here. All I need to do is press hot cue C on the performance pads. It'll take me to that point in the track and start playing the track. Now if I want to go to hot cue D, I can press hot cue D and it'll take me to that point in the track. And let's go right to the end of the track, hot cue H. That can take me back as well. That is the main use for hot cues. But as you can see here, I also use them for a different way, which is as just visual markers so I can see different points in tracks. And with the color coordination, it tells me that each hot cue means something different. So there's two different uses there. You can jump to the different part in the track and you can also use them as visual markers and color code them and leave notes as well so they mean different things to you. So next, moving across on the performance pads is the pad effects mode on the FLX4. So you can see this changes here according to what performance mode you have set up. And just here now we have pad effects. Now I personally don't use this one a lot. You can have a play around with this in your own time. It basically just adds different effects to your track. So if I press play now and use the first one, it's going to do a trans effect at 1 beat. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about effects. That's a whole video by itself and it will take too long to go into right now. But you can have a play around with these if you like. So if I press play, it's going to do trans effects, which flicks the channel fader up and down for you. And then I've also got a release effect, which echoes out the track. Even though it's playing there, I can press it again and bring it back in. Now what's interesting on my DJ controller, as you might see, is I have these white stickers. Now you might not be able to read them on the screen, but basically these control my stems. What stems does is it removes different sounds from your tracks. So I now replace my pad effects buttons with the stems functions just here. I'm not going to go into this right now. I do have a video that fully explains how to set up stems on your performance pads and also on your EQ dials. And I'll put a card to that up at the top of the video right now if you want to check it out next. Then next along we have beat jump. Now beat jump basically jumps forwards and backwards in the track the amount of beats that you select. So as we can see on the screen here, it says number 4 is in the top left hand corner of the pad. You either go backwards or forwards. So if I press this first performance pad, I'm going to jump backwards 4 beats in the track. If I press the one next to it, it's going to jump forward 4 beats at a time through the track. And this all depends on how many beats you want to jump. So if I go one below, just here in the bottom left 2, that will jump 16 beats forwards and backwards. So now I went back 16 beats and forward 16 beats. Now I don't really use this much when DJing live, as it might sound a little bit off to the audience jumping through the track at random beats. So it'll sound like this. Some of them at the start didn't actually sound too bad, but you get the idea. Now the main reason that I actually used beat jump is to prepare my tracks, and I actually use this a lot. This is how I set my hot cues and quickly jump through the tracks to get to these different points. So for example now if I want to get to hot cue C, I can use the 32 beat jump to jump straight to it, and I'm at that point. So when I'm setting these hot cues, this is what I'll use. So from here then I could set hot cue C, and then jump further in the track and set hot cue D, and you can see it takes me straight to them hot cues. I use it that much that I actually don't use it on my DJ controller. I leave my DJ controller in hotkey mode, and I've actually set up keyboard shortcuts on my laptop so I can do this straight away. So now I'm jumping forwards and backwards throughout the track using a keyboard shortcut on my laptop. So this way I can quickly jump through the track to hot cue D, set a hot cue, maybe jump back a little bit, set another hot cue, jump back a little bit, set another hot cue. I can move a lot faster instead of jumping back and forth between functions. But that is what beat jump does. It jumps forwards and backwards throughout your tracks at the number of beats that you select. If you are interested more in why I set my hot cues like I do and why I use beat jump on my laptop and why I use it a lot to plan and prepare, then I would check out my full DJ Academy in the description below this video, which is basically where I put all of my DJ techniques and everything that I know about DJing into one place. It's exactly like these YouTube videos, but there's a lot more videos, they go into a lot more detail, and it's a lot more structured. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, make sure you check that out. But next, moving on, we've got the sampler right on the end. Most DJ controllers do have a sampler button, and basically what this does is it just triggers different samples or sound samples that you put into the sample bank. So you might have noticed that it's not changed up here on the performance mode on the DJ software. But if you go to the top left-hand side of Record Box, there's 9 squares just there, and if we click that, it opens up the sample bank. So these are just a couple of ones that I use when I DJ live. I just realized then that you couldn't see it because of the screen, but you should be able to see it now. So this just opens up the sample bank like this. And now if I press the corresponding performance pad, it will trigger that sound. So let's say I just press this one, it's going to do the reload effects, which just says reload. And then on the left-hand side, if I put it in sampler, we've also got some sirens that you can set off as well. Now you can just drag any kind of audio file up into these banks and then trigger them with the sample bank. All right, so that's the performance pads covered. Let's move on to the manual loop function. So just quickly as well, also sometimes on the performance pads, you'll have a loop function, which is kind of like the beat jump where you'll select it and it'll give you numbered values like in doubles 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. And you just press that performance pad and it'll set an automatic loop to that value. But right now I'm just going to show you the manual loop. So how you use the manual loop function is basically the first orange button is the in button. This is the start of your loop. The second orange button is the out button, and this puts the end of your loop. So if you press play on this track now, and then I press the in button, it's going to set the start of the loop, and then when I press the out button, it's going to set the end of the loop. And this is going to keep looping constantly until I exit the loop. Now, I'm not going to exit the loop just yet. What we're going to look at are these 2 arrows just here. This one halves the loop down, and the other one doubles the loop in value. So the one on the left halves it down, so if I press that now, it's going to go from 8 to 4 beat loop, and then again to 2 beats, and then down to 1. Now the arrow to the right will extend the loop and it will double the loop, back to 2, back to 4, back to 8, and so on. Now to exit the loop, you just need to press exit and it will stop looping the track. Fairly easy. You can reduce down the loop manually. I personally don't use this a lot, but that would look like this. So you can set your in point and then set your out point. Now from here, if you press the out button again, and then start using the jog wheel and pull it back, it's going to change the end position. It's going to make it shorter or longer. Now you can do the same with the in button, so if you press the in button, you now have control of the start of the loop. Make it longer or shorter. And then exit the loop. I personally don't use that one that much, but you can use it sometimes to create some build-ups. Also, just one last thing on the loop function just here on the FLX4 is it has a 4-beat loop button. So the same button that you press for exit, if the track was playing and doesn't already have a loop set, it will automatically set a 4-beat loop. So if I press play now, and then press the exit button, it automatically sets a 4-beat loop. So now let's move across and look at the sync buttons. Now these sync buttons are great pieces of technology and I really like them and I use them all the time when I DJ. And don't let anybody else tell you that the sync button is bad. So basically what the sync button does is it beat matches your tracks automatically. So you don't have to use the tempo fader and jog wheel like I've shown you previously. So let's get that other track up that we had before. Now, if I put them both at 0, so the track on the left is at 126 beats per minute, the track on the right is 130 beats per minute, instead of using the tempo fader like we did last time and then touching them in with the jog wheel, now if I press the sync button, they're both going to beat match to whatever track is the master deck. So now they'll go to 130 beats per minute. So I'm going to press both on, and just as I press this button now, just watch this change from 126 to 130. So now they're both at the same speeds, but also now when I press play, they'll automatically snap the beat grids in time with each other. So let's take this track back to the start, set the cue point because the cue point's now moved. Now watch when I press play, they'll automatically snap in time with each other. And they are perfectly in time, so I'll show you again. Now I deliberately pressed it out of time then, and they snap in time. So you can't really go wrong with it. Now what it actually does is it doesn't snap the actual kick drums or the sounds in time. It snaps the beat grid in time with the other track's beat grid. And that is these white lines that are set on the kick drums. Now one reason why some people don't like using the sync button, and they say that it gets it wrong, is because the beat grids are not set correctly. If you know how to set your beat grids, you shouldn't have a problem with sync at all. And that is why I really like it. But you will get some DJs saying it's cheating or things like that, which I think is absolutely ridiculous considering we're using all this technology anyway. Why is the sync button bad? And I personally think it's because a lot of the time people don't understand how to use it. When they press sync, the beat grids will be out of time and it won't work, so then they automatically don't like the beat sync button. And they prefer then to use manual beat matching. Before anyone criticizes me on that, I do have, if you might see on my videos, 2 Technics 1210s behind me. So I definitely know how to manually beat match. I've DJ'd in clubs on these. So if anyone wants to say that I don't know how to manually beat match, Google what Technics 1210s are and you'll find out. So that's what the sync button does, and I'll leave that there for now. I can go on for hours about the sync button and beat matching. Next, we'll take a look at the mixer section in the middle of the decks. Firstly, up here on the top right of this deck is the master level. This basically controls the whole volume of the whole decks. Everything that comes out of that DJ controller is controlled by this dial. So whether you've got one channel faded down and 2 channels at different volumes and a mic inputted in, and you're hitting samplers, no matter what's coming out of this DJ controller, it will be controlled by this dial. Then right at the top in the center, you'll generally have on a DJ controller a browse knob. So from here, if you just twist this, you'll see now it'll go through my library up and down, and you can select the right or left to load them tracks on the left or right. So now if I want to change the track on the right, I just hit this load button here, and it will change it on the right hand side. If I want to change the track on the left, hit the left load button, change the track on the left. So that's what that's for, and most DJ controllers will have something similar. Then next going down, we have what's called the trim dial on this controller, or it's also called the gain. And this basically sets the volume of the whole channel. So whatever you set the trim dial to, however loud you set this, will determine how loud everything underneath it can go. So this sets the overall volume. You generally want both trim dials to match unless you have one song that's really much louder than the other song. These are the 2 things where you'll match the volume so they sound the same. Once you've done that, you generally just leave them and use the things underneath and the dials and the buttons to mix your tracks. For me, I personally just have a set and forget mindset, so I'll set them both mainly at 12 o'clock like this, and then just forget about them. It's very rare I'll have to adjust the tracks' volumes to match each other, as most tracks now are produced at a similar volume. Then under the trim dial, we have the EQ dials. These EQ dials allow you to control the volume of 3 different frequencies. So it separates your volume into 3 different frequencies. We have the high frequencies, the mid frequencies, and the low frequencies. So now if I press play on the track on the right, and I'll put it to a main part of the track, you can generally hear what it sounds like. So if I press play, we'll take the highs out, and then we can also take the mids out, and the lows. So that's mainly what the EQ dials are used for, is reducing frequencies. So you don't generally see anybody boosting the frequencies. There's not much point in that. You might as well just turn the trim dial up if you want louder volume. It's mainly to create separation and remove frequencies from tracks so they don't clash with each other. Now next below this, we have the filter dial. When you twist it to the left hand side, it does what's called a low pass filter, which basically lets the low frequencies pass through and cuts out the high frequencies. And you can do this on a scale, so as you turn the dial, it gradually removes the high frequencies. So that sounds like this. all the way to the left is now just left with low frequencies. Now the right hand side is the opposite, that's the high pass filter. So basically that means that it lets the high frequencies pass through and it cuts out the low frequencies. So that would sound like this. The more you turn it, the more effect it has. So now we've just got them highs left and we can reduce them back in. This can be used for build-ups or to mix in and out of tracks and slowly introduce them and remove them, or just taking out some low frequencies and then bringing them back in for more impact. Next below this we have the individual channel faders. So basically what these do is control the volume of that channel in relation to the trim dial. So you cannot go louder than what the trim dial is set to. So you can imagine that the trim dial sets the overall volume and then the channel fader has that ceiling of the trim dial. This is used so that you don't blast people's heads off and bust their eardrums with this channel fader by putting it on full volume and making it go really loud. Whereas if you had the trim dial and you just turn that up full volume straight away, you might damage some speakers or damage some people's ears if you're in a club. So this is where you got to be careful with the trim dial. Set it generally at 12 o'clock and then you can do whatever you like with this channel fader. So if I press play now, we can hear this track on the right. Let's move it on a bit. I can turn it all the way down to silence and then put it up as fast as I want and it won't go louder than the trim dial. So that's why it's a really good tool to use when mixing tracks together. And next on the mixer we have the crossfader. So basically what this allows you to do is mix between two tracks by using only one fader. When it's all the way over to the left hand side you can only hear the left hand deck. When it's all the way over to the right hand side you can only hear the right hand deck. And then when it's in the middle you can hear both decks at the same volume. And then either side is anywhere in between. It just gradually fades from one track to another. So I'm going to press play on both these tracks now. And we'll flick them on a little bit. Alright, so let's turn them on. So now you can only hear the left hand side, and if we move it across, it'll slowly fade in the next track. Now they'll both be at the same volume, and we can go to the right side. Now don't judge me on that mix, I'm just showing you the crossfader. But that's how the crossfader works. Now as you might have seen then, I had to turn it on and activate it. A lot of the time I don't use the crossfader, especially if it gets knocked, it can affect your mix if you are just using the channel faders. So what I do with these blue dials here and these activation buttons, I just turn them off. So now without these blue buttons activating on either side, the crossfader is inactive. So if I press play, it doesn't have any effect on the decks. So that's why I generally have it turned off. Next, let's take a look at the FX unit and applying effects. Now you can also access the effects panel up on the top here, on the top left hand side, and it opens up the effects panel just here. Now it can look quite complicated at first. I'm not going to go into everything on the effects panel. I'm just going to go through mainly what's on the DJ controller. Now the first thing on this, most DJ controllers will have the same buttons and dials, they just might be in different places. And the first thing on this DJ controller is selecting which deck it affects. So we have 1, 2, or both. So now if I set it to deck 2, it will affect the deck on the right hand side. Then if I just press this down arrow, what it's going to do is change the effect. So at the minute we have it here and it says low cut echo. This is the one that controls this deck. So now if I press this button, the down arrow, it's going to change it here. You can see it's changing it over on the left hand side, but you can see it also change on the right. Gives us a drop down of all the different effects. And we can just click through. If we want to go back on this DJ controller, we can hold shift and this time it'll go up through the effects instead of down. So I'm going to take this back to my low cut echo because that's the one I like. Then these two arrows either side will change the beat value for how many beats is affected. So right now we have it on 1, but if I press it to the right, it's going to go to 2, 4, 8. So it doubles up and then back down as well. You can go to fractions of beats as well. Now the dial just below it is how intense you want the effect. So when it's all the way down, it doesn't have any effect. The more you turn it up, the more that effects will affect your track. And then the button underneath is just the on and off button. So this turns the effect on and off. To be able to hear anything, you have to have both one, the dial turned up to some degree, and also have the effect on. If you only do one or the other, you won't hear anything. So if it's turned off, but the dial turned up, nothing will happen. If the dial's turned down, but you turned it on, nothing will happen. You have to both have it turned on and turned up to be able to hear the effect. So right now I have an echo, or the low cut echo, which basically means it's an echo without the low frequencies. It cuts the low frequencies out. Let's press play on this track. Now I need to turn the effect on. We won't be able to hear anything, but as soon as I start turning the dial up, you'll hear it echo the track. And I can half this down, and turn it down. So now, like I said, if I don't have it turned on and just turn the dial, it won't do anything. Can't hear anything. If I have it turned down, turn it on, you can't hear anything. You need both turned on at the same time. So that's basically the FX unit explained. How you use that practically in DJ terms is a different video in itself, but right now that is how you use the buttons and dials. Next, let's take a look at the headphones unit. Now you're not going to be able to hear the effects that this has because it will come through my headphones, but I'll give you a quick run through now. You'll have a mix dial. Now the mix dial basically splits your headphones into two. When it's turned all the way to the left hand side, on the Q setting, this is how you listen to tracks in your headphones that are not played out to the audience. So let's say I have this volume on the left hand side, let's get a track up. So now let's say the deck on the left hand side is playing to the audience. We can hear that now through our speakers, but now if I press play on the track on the right with the channel fader down, we can't hear that, the audience cannot hear that. But we can listen to both decks at the same time in our headphones. From here we need to turn it over to the left hand side to the Q setting, and then turn both Q lights on just on the channels here. Now, no matter what these channel faders do, you'll be able to hear both tracks in your headphones. If you want to only hear the right hand side, you just turn the left Q button off. So now, even though the audience can't hear it because the channel fader is down, you can hear this track on the right hand side. So now with this setup, with the mix dial over to the left hand side, this Q button on, you should be able to hear this right hand track on the right hand side in your headphones. Then you can hear them both. Then if we turn this one off, you can hear it on the left hand side. It's hard to get across in a video because you can't hear what's going on in the headphones, but have a play around with that at home and you should be able to tell the difference. Now, if you turn this mix dial all the way over to the right hand side to the master setting, this lets you hear in your headphones what's being played out loud to the audience live. The reason why you might do that is because sometimes when you're in big clubs and venues, the sound systems can have a lot of speakers that make it quite echoey if you had your headphones off, which can sometimes make it hard to mix your tracks together. So sometimes you might want to leave your headphones on and mix together two tracks and hear what the audience can hear out loud. So for this, all you need to do on the FLX4 is just turn the Q button on underneath the master level. Some DJ controllers won't require you to do that, but on this one you do. So now what you do with the channel faders will affect what gets played out to the audience, and you will then hear it in your headphones. So I like to see it as the mix dial over to the left hand side on the Q setting as preparation and getting your tracks ready and beat matching them. And then over on the right hand side on the master setting is me listening to my mix live as I'm doing it to the audience. Just below that then you have the level dial, which is self-explanatory, is how loud your headphones are and how loud you can hear the music. So there you have it. That is pretty much how to use everything on your DJ equipment. Like I said at the start of the video, it is just a brief overview of each function. If you do want to go into more detail on each function and how to use it practically when DJing, check out my DJ Academy in the description, where I cover everything in a lot more detail and just show you basically everything that I know about DJing. Now there are two extra functions on the Pioneer DDJ-FLX4 that are specific to that DJ controller, which is the Smart Fader and the Smart CFX, but I'm going to cover them in separate videos as they are specific just to the FLX4. I generally wanted to cover everything that would be on most DJ controllers in this video and cover the main functions that you can find on pretty much any DJ equipment. I hope you liked this video and I hope you found it valuable, and I hope it makes it a lot easier to navigate your DJ controller. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again in the future, and bye for now.